The existing international security architecture, represented by the UN Security Council, continues to hamper efforts to maintain international peace and security.
78 years since its formation, the structure of the United Nations Security Council remains largely unchanged.
The Council is, by all intents and purposes, dysfunctional, undemocratic, non-inclusive, unaccountable, autocratic, and at best, opaque.
Africa and its 1.4 billion people remain excluded from its key decision-making structures.
Now, African leaders at the UN General Assembly this week have been making their case for reform of the Security Council. Currently, the Council, which is supposed to maintain global peace and security, has 5 permanent members, none of them from Africa. Just 2 weeks ago, the US announced it would support the creation of 2 permanent seats for African countries. But the push for a shake-up is far from certain to succeed. Rama Yad is director of the Atlantic Council's Africa Centre. She's a Senegalese-born French politician with years of experience in international politics. Welcome to DW. Why does the Security Council...
Thank you very much for having me.
Why does the Security Council need a permanent African presence rather than, say, Latin American?
I just returned from the United Nations General Assembly in New York, where, of course, many Africans talked about this willingness of the United States to support the creation of these 2 permanent seats for Africa. I think it makes sense, given the demographic rise of African countries. Demographically speaking, Africa will be in 30 years a continent of demographic power, and it has to be recognized. Within the General Assembly, we have to note also that African nations hold 28%, almost 30% of the votes. It's the largest group ahead of Asia, of the Americas, of Western Europe, and it has to be taken into consideration. So I think these 2 reasons are enough to explain this change. And also from Sudan to Democratic Republic of Congo, certainly a greater participation by Africans is important in the resolutions of conflicts there at the Security Council.
Which brings us to the next question then, if you follow the logic. If we are talking about 2 seats on the 2 permanent seats on the council, if there were to be 2 African countries, which ones, and decided how?
That is the most pressing question, I think. But before getting there, it's important to understand that the US announcement came with a strong limitation. These African countries would not have the all-important veto power. But adding African nations to the Security Council as permanent member would require to select, as you said, to select the white countries. Should it be Nigeria as the most populous country in Africa, or South Africa, the largest economy, or Ethiopia, because Addis Ababa is the African city capital? That is a scary question for Africans, and I'm not sure they are ready to answer tomorrow.
OK, so in principle, 2 African seats. We'll deal with the details later. Let's talk about the point that you made there about this America's backing for this. These 2 African seats, if they happened, no veto power. We're talking effectively about a second-class membership of this exclusive club.
Yeah, no power means that the United States, despite their strong statement, are not willing to propose a systemic reform that would upend the post-World War II order. I also think that it's an important announcement because the US is the first among the permanent 5 members of the Security Council to explicitly support these 2 African seats. And as for China and Russia, it's interesting to know that even if they present themselves as the champions of the so-called global South, they have never been so far in their promotion of African voices in the international bodies. So it's a bold move from the U.S. We can understand that because of the hard competition that is ongoing on the African continent between global powers and middle regional powers too. But there's a lot that remains to be done.
But do you think the United States' backing for this idea is genuine? And I ask this, or cynical, because it's never going to happen, or it's certainly not going to happen during Joe Biden's presidency. So it's fine for the United States to signal, look, we're your best mates, while knowing that the rest of the Security Council, the rest of the permanent members, are not going to back this.
You're not wrong, because even if the U.S. resumed the U.S.-Africa Summit, like the U.S.-Africa Summit that took place in December 2022 in Washington, D.C., African nations felt like a bit of frustration about the Washington policy to Africa. And it's unclear about this matter. It's unclear how Washington's commitment is compatible with its previously expressed willingness to also support the permanent membership for India, for example, for Germany and Japan. And also they requested seats for Latin America, the Caribbean, etc. So your question can be understood. You know, it's clear that the next president of the United States will have to answer the same question, and it won't be Joe Biden, obviously.
Right. And so while we're about it then, doesn't the whole system need root and branch reform? Because we're operating in a post-Second World War system, as indeed the Secretary General said when he was opening the current event, the General Assembly.
Yeah, I mean, this geopolitical order is a legacy from the Cold War. And you know why 5 countries have been picked to represent the Security Council: United States, France, the United Kingdom, Russia, and China. But the world has changed a lot. And beyond the question of representation, many observers and actors of the UN system are wondering how this system is sustainable. For example, the Security Council usually takes the lead in determining the threats to the peace in the world, to determine aggressions. It calls upon the parties to a dispute to settle it by peaceful means. So and request adjustment and settlement. So and sometimes it's successful. You know, for example, Russia's suspension from the Human Rights Council, for example, or missions with African Union in Somalia, or missions, you know, in many countries. But the problem is, as you can see everywhere in the world, there's a lot of conflicts the United Nations cannot solve, from Ukraine to Israel. So now you have all these people and actors and countries questioning the way the Security Council works. So now the time for change is very crucial. And that's why maybe beyond African representation, the US would like to take the lead of a reform. But will this reform be a systemic reform? I have a few doubts about that.
Good talking to you. Thank you for talking us through that. Rama Yad from the Atlantic Council's Africa Centre. Thank you so much.